of speakers who will share their insights and experiences with us. First, I'd like to introduce Matthew Wu and Alan Huang. They are the co-founders of the Happiness Initiatives by Peers. Matthew is the brother of Alan. Matthew is the brother of Andrew, a 7th grader here at Gateway. And Alan is a student at the Pingree School. Together, they have initiated a remarkable peer-driven mindfulness program based on the teachings of the Dalai Lama. We are truly honored to have two distinguished panelists with us tonight. The first is the Venerable Geshe Lhakdor, a distinguished Tibetan Buddhist scholar. His deep knowledge and expertise in Eastern mindfulness techniques will provide valuable insights into utilizing these practices to improve our lives. Our second panelist, Dr. Jodi Gold, a renowned New York City child and adult psychiatrist, has extensive experience that will shed light on Western mindfulness techniques and their relevance to our well-being. This discussion will highlight cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness importance, and especially for students with learning disabilities, and how it can positively impact our lives. Following the discussion, I'll pose a few questions that we've received in advance. This will be followed by an audience Q&A, and finally we will conclude with closing remarks from Matthew and Alan, who will share more of their special Happiness Initiatives by Peers program and a poem by Gateway 7th graders Andrew Wu and Jack Higgins. I want to express my gratitude to all of you for joining us tonight. This panel discussion, I know, is going to provide us with valuable tools to navigate the daily lives and incredible challenges for our families and for ourselves. Please join me in welcoming Matthew and Alan to the stage.
Hi everyone, I'm Matthew Wu, and I'm a 9th grader in Horace Mann.
And my name is Alan Huang, and I'm an 8th grader at Pingree. As Matthew's friend, we've shared laughs, adventures, and ups and downs together. And one time, I even tossed a book at his forehead, leaving a scar that's still there today.
I want to begin by thanking the Gateway School for hosting this event, thanking Geshe Lhakdor for coming here all the way from India, thanking Dr. Gold for being here, and all of you in the audience for coming as well.
The purpose of this panel discussion is to show that in order to help our loved ones effectively, we must realize how important it is to discover the root cause of frustration and conflict.
My main inspiration for hosting this event was the experience of growing up with my brother Andrew, who is a student here at Gateway. For both my parents and me, it took a long time to adjust to the learning differences caused by his ADHD. Even something as simple as asking him to finish his homework could result in hours of arguing. For a long time, we thought he was helpless. But recently, by spending more time with him and reflecting as a family, we've come to understand his problems from his own perspective. We found that our hours of arguing were caused by different ways of thinking and processing our emotions. Over the summer, we began using new strategies we've learned to teach Andrew that he has the agency to change himself. And since then, he's improved a lot because he now understands that he is in control of his own choices and seeks to improve the lives of himself and others.
As Matthew's friend, I noticed that we, along with Andrew, have improved through the years. Both of us seem to be much more calm now. Rather than getting irritated when facing conflict, we try to find a solution or a compromise. This led us to ponder philosophical questions having to do with self-control, such as, how do we manage our emotions in the face of frustration? Last March, our curiosity took us all the way to India, where we saw wisdom from many spiritual leaders, even including His Holiness the Dalai Lama. He encouraged us to teach at the TCV, or Tibetan Children's Village, a school for Tibetan refugees. Through our journey teaching in the TCV, we were incredibly inspired by the students' kindness and focus, despite their bleak financial situation and separation from their parents. This reminded us of our initial question: how did they navigate their emotions so well?
Part of the answer was that they all attended a debate-focused philosophy and ethics class since they were 5 years old, which taught them to question everything and be aware of others' perspectives. The core teaching at the center of this class spoke to my own experience arguing with Andrew. I found that the strategies the students used at TCV also worked well with him. After discussing with students and teachers, and after seeing the impact these strategies had in my own family, we realized that a simple mindset change could shift one's perspective on the world. From a young age, each kid was also assigned daily chores, teaching them to focus on the present and take their mind off of other issues. Through this process of heedfulness, they were able to clean their external environment that also led to a cleansing of their internal environment.
This realization is why we started writing a curriculum called the Happiness Initiative by Peers, to teach others what we learned at the TCV. Our curriculum focuses on creating a space for peers to help one another express their feelings. Through our experiences, we've seen that kids often struggle with communicating their emotions with an adult, who's usually seen as an outside authority figure. In making this a peer-led program, we hope to encourage kids to honestly share their feelings. In class, we'll explore real-life problems to help them map out a solution, which will direct them to stay aware of their situation if they get frustrated, rather than get blinded by their emotions.
In our curriculum, we seek to improve the kids' mindsets by telling them that they have the agency to change and to encourage and guide them through the process. We want to personalize dense and confusing philosophical concepts to implement them in the real world with these children. Lastly, we want to create an enduring impact on the children we teach and a drive for them to help others in their communities. We're looking forward to partnering with the Gateway School in facilitating this curriculum over the winter and spring.
In the course of our journey together, we have personally observed the impact of Eastern education focused around the mind and heart. And it's why we are so thrilled to introduce our first speaker, Geshe Lhakdor. Geshe Lhakdor is a Tibetan Buddhist scholar and was the English translator for His Holiness the Dalai Lama for 16 years. He has co-translated and co-produced several books by the Dalai Lama, including The Way to Freedom and The Joy of Living and Dying in Peace. He was also involved in multiple educational initiatives. He's a key advisor to the Sea Learning program. It is a program developed by Emory University in collaboration with the Dalai Lama. Sea Learning is a global K-12 education initiative designed to provide educators with the tools to cultivate social, emotional, and ethical intelligence in students.
Currently, he holds the positions of the Director of the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives in Dharamshala, India, and Head of the Science Education Project. He also holds the prestigious title of Honorary Professor at the University of British Columbia and was awarded with an honorary professorship by the University of Delhi's Department of Psychology. Please join us in welcoming Geshe Lhakdor.
Is this good enough? Yeah. Thank you for this beautiful introduction. I'm extremely pleased to be here in this beautiful Gateway School. And it is very, very encouraging to have parents like you and young people like them who are taking this initiative to make not only the school good, but America good and the world good. The initiative has to come from the ground level. So I'm highly, highly appreciative of what you are doing. I'm a Buddhist, as you can all see. In his teaching, the Buddha always said that no matter how enlightened and how educated you are, you cannot just teach the same thing to everybody. You need to consider the diverse needs, mental dispositions, and capacities of people, and accordingly you need to teach. So that's, I think, what you're doing here. I have always been saying that in order to lead a meaningful human life, we need to first understand some of the important human features. The most important human feature is human intelligence, the capacity to judge between what is right and what is wrong. Unfortunately, in many cases, either we don't use this intelligence or the intelligence get corrupted and we misuse this intelligence. And we use this intelligence for inventing ballistic missiles, atom bombs, and many, many destructive activities in the society. This is awful. This is very sad. The second important feature of human beings is the language, the capacity to share, the capacity to speak. Now, many people again don't see the importance of this language. If there is a kind of misunderstanding between the tiger and the lion, the only thing they can do is pounce upon each other and try to kill each other and use the physical power. We also, human beings, also doing the same thing. The reason that we have this language is when there is disagreement, problem, we must sit down and discuss and solve the problem through dialogue, negotiation. So we have this capacity, wonderful capacity of human intelligence to see what is right, what is wrong, what is good for you, what is good for others, what is good temporarily, what is good in the long run. As well as when there is a problem, sit down, think carefully, and discuss and have dialogue and solve the problem. And we don't do this. And because of this, the result is the conflict that we see right now in the Middle East, Ukraine, and many other places. We neglect all those problems right in the beginning, and then when there is a conflagration of fire, there is really nothing much you can do. So therefore, I think it is extremely important to see two things. First, we need to clearly recognize that we all want happiness. We need to have a very clear understanding of this. So I'm going to ask you some questions. Do you all want happiness? Yes. For how many days? See, I have asked this question to many, many places in the world. Do you want happiness? Everybody says yes. For how many days? Then they laugh like you. By this they are saying that Geshe Lhakdor, we want happiness as long as possible. Normally, I'm asking this question because normally in our rushed life, we act as if we don't want that long-lasting happiness. Instead, we want fleeting pleasures. So one very important point that I want to deliver here is make a clear distinction between pleasures and happiness. Pleasures are of the senses, Happiness is of the mind, right? So now, since we all agree that we want long-lasting happiness, the next important question is, what do you think is the main source of that long-lasting happiness? From where that long-lasting happiness will mainly come from? From where do you think? Huh? From where? From money? Huh? From fame, from name? Yes, you do get some happiness, fleeting pleasures, fleeting happiness, but I'm talking about the main source of happiness. The main source of happiness is to be found within oneself. And what do you mean by finding that main source of happiness from within oneself? That means you need to have the right mental outlook, right mental attitude. And what do you mean by right mental outlook? Right mental outlook means you should have a mental outlook, a perception which is in harmony with the law of nature. And what is this thing called law of nature? If you look at the nature of the law of nature clearly shows that we are all very closely interconnected, interrelated. Between countries, between societies, between communities, between individuals, we are closely linked and connected, especially in today's world. Although there is so much development in science and technology, but in fact, this speed of the science and technology has hurled us into the face of each other. It is impossible to think about existing alone without depending on others. Now, this being the case, how can you harm those human beings, environment on which you are dependent? Right? So therefore we need to have this larger perspective of this interconnected reality, the web of life. I have a very limited time, I'm not going into detail, but what I'm saying is you need to have this larger perspective and don't make these stupid discriminations, white, black, yellow, red, Tibetan, Chinese, whatever, We are very fond of making the discrimination. As I already said, look at the law of nature. Nature does not make distinction. Nature does not make discrimination. If there is an earthquake, it will shake everybody. It will not shake only Indians and not Tibetans or Tibetans and not Chinese. It will shake everybody. If there's a tsunami, if there's a fire, nature does not make discrimination. We make discrimination. Nature does not need ethics. Nature does not need morality. We need ethics. We need morality. We are the ones who give value to things, right? So it's really, really important to develop this, system of giving value to things. Not only, knowing the price of things, but the value of things. And they are also not only the value of money, but value of human life, value of human beings. In Buddhism, we call this human life precious human life. Precious human life means you have this amazing intelligence which has amazing capacity to bring about changes in the society, to bring about love and compassion and benefit millions of people, just as His Holiness the Dalai Lama is doing, just as Mother Teresa did, Martin Luther King did. So many good people are there. Just one person can transform the world and bring so much peace and happiness. And they are able to do this not because they had intelligence, but their intelligence was supported by warm-heartedness, loving kindness and compassion. And therefore the Buddha said, if you have one quality in the palm of your hand, you have all the qualities in the palm of your hand. That is compassion, empathy, right? Unless we have this moral compass, we will end up doing all the silly things. In many cases, we are already doing. So morality or ethics is the one. What do we mean by morality and ethics? Ethics basically means not harming others, helping others, not harming others is ethics. Helping others is ethics. Doing good things is ethics. Right? So when you have this, when you live a life of this kind of morality and ethics, you will be tension-free. You will be depression-free. You will have no loneliness. I will take the example of the Tibetan people. Like me, I never suffered from loneliness or depression, things like that. Even though we are in exile and we are refugees. You have the pictures behind me, These are the, kids in Dharamsala. There is a class up to 5th class of different ages. Last year I spent a whole day with these kids, visiting each and every class, talking to them. And that was, in my life, one of the happiest moments in my life. The kids, you can imagine, they are refugee kids. But because of the guidance of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the senior Tibetans, the parents, teachers, because of their collaborative effort, if you look at their classes, they don't have all the comforts that we have in developed countries. Some of you already visited it. But they were so open, so warm, so clever, so intelligent. I cannot express the experience that I had on that day. You can. That's why I'm showing this picture. If you look at their photos, there's hardly a single child which is not smiling, full of happy. After I gave a talk, they were all listening as if they are like 15 to 20 years old. They were all listening like this. After the talk, they all came and hugged me, surrounded me. I was completely engulfed by their tenderness, by their warmth. This is the result of showing love, showing compassion, giving the children freedom to do what they want. Because at the end of the day, life will not become happy just by running and getting money. Although I also agree that we need material development, but that development not necessarily come just by unchecked greed. In today's world, there is enough for everybody's need, but not enough for everybody's greed. And it is because of this unchecked greed, it is because of this inner poverty. I've always been saying that much of the suffering that you are experiencing today is a clear indication of starvation of human mind. Right? Right? So we are just running, everybody's running. Running for what? Running to fulfill the sensual objects. And the mind itself is empty. There's no inner resources. A clear indication was during the COVID-19 experience, when we all experienced lockdown, there were many people who don't know how to live alone. You see? So this is a disease. Not being able to live alone and also not knowing how to live with others. You need to learn one of these two things. Either you should know how to live alone or you need to know how to live with others. And all this will come if you pay a little bit attention, use your human intelligence, undertake some meditation, maintain some kind of mindfulness. Meditation, mindfulness is not just sitting in a corner, closing your eye and do some feel-good practices. Meditation, mindfulness means to be aware, alert, to see what is happening around you, what is good for you, what is good for others, things like that, right? So meditation basically means making your mind habituated with the good ways of life. Such kind of meditation is necessary because our mind is, unfortunately, whether you believe it or not, if we have time we can debate over this also, right? So whether you believe it or not, our mind is predominantly, I'm not saying completely, predominantly controlled by unhealthy ways of thinking or negative emotions. Because of this we suffer. Because of this we have loneliness. Because of this we have low self-esteem. Because of this we have depression. Because of this we have anxiety. Because of this, then also physically hypertension or whatever. All countless diseases that we are experiencing today, the root is in the mind. When the mind is negative, there's anger, there's jealousy, there's hatred. You cannot have happiness and peace. I mean, just let me give you one example about the negativeness of these negative emotions, how good they are. Because we need to discard these negative emotions by seeing their destructiveness. For example, now think about anger. Is there anybody here who right in the morning makes a motivation saying that today I will get angry? Anybody? No. That means you already sense that it's not good. But in the course of the day, you meet some strange people, you get angry, right? It happens, you flare out, right? And then at the end of the day, when you reflect back that you got angry during the day and so forth, again, is there anybody who will say that today I was angry, I fought with somebody, therefore I really enjoyed the day? Is there anybody? No. And then all of us, the women wants to be a beautiful woman, man wants to be a handsome person, right? Right? That's why we use some cosmetics, make our hair, things like that, right? And after all this donning, ornamentation, you get angry. You have gold earrings, things like that, then get angry like this. Are you handsome now? Are you beautiful now? No. When you get angry, blood pressure increases. I'm not saying it is scientifically proved. And you can feel it. The worst is when you get angry, you become mad. Being mad means not being able to distinguish between what is right and what is wrong, what you are saying. We get mad. So do you want to get mad? Do you want to? All these conflicts and wars that we see in the world is clear indication of insanity, madness, right? So I'm just giving you one example. Similarly, you think about attachment and so many other things. So therefore, to conclude, there's countless sufferings that we are encountering today is primarily because of short-sightedness, misconception of reality, negative emotion and so forth. So therefore it is extremely important not to let the emotions run wild and regulate the emotions. This cannot be done just by praying. This can be done through meditation, through mindfulness, through awareness. So therefore when we teach ethics, we say three things. One, awareness. First, be aware of the reality. And once you develop this awareness, you will develop this feeling of affinity, connection to everybody. That all these people sitting here, they also get problem. I also get problem. So let us be nice. All these people sitting here, they're also going to die one day. I'm also going to die one day. So right now, this is the time we be nice to each other. You see, when you develop this awareness, this kind of feeling of oneness, the need to help each other, automatically comes in your mind. And then the next step is develop compassion. Thinking how nice if all these people are without suffering. Now it is not enough to develop this good mental thinking, how nice if all sentient beings without suffering. The third is engagement. You need to walk and go into the society and do things that make a difference in the society. So therefore, in today's kind of education, they say education must be of 3H. Head, heart, and hand. Head means knowledge. Heart means knowledge alone is not enough. Smartness is not enough. That must be supported by warmth, compassion, and love. And then, hand means you should actually go into the society, do things that will bring about a change. So therefore, it is really important that we should not be happy with the modern system of education, where people are only taught how to become literate, reading, writing, mathematics, and so forth. And then you get some small piece of paper called certificate, right? Then you get a job, then you think this is the end of life. The real meaning of education means human flourishing. The result of education should be that we all should become home-hearted, good person, happy person. Thank you. I think I did not check the time, right time. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Geshe, for that amazing summary of Eastern approaches to emotional well-being. Now, I'd like to introduce our panelists representing the Western approach, Dr. Jodi Gold. Dr. Gold is the author of Screen Smart Parenting, awarded as the runner-up book of the year by the National Academy of Nursing. and is the director of the Gold Center for Mind, Health, and Wellness. She received her BA at the University of Pennsylvania, completed her medical training at the University of Tennessee, and did her residency in psychiatry at the Weill Cornell College of Medicine. Dr. Gold has been featured on CNN, the New York Times, and the Washington Post, and has also received awards from the National Institute of Mental Health, the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and the Association of Women Psychiatrists.
Please join us in welcoming Dr. Gold.
Thank you so much for having me. This is kind of a very difficult act to follow, and I feel very honored to be sharing the stage with you. And very challenged with the idea of trying to represent the Western sort of thought process. So, yeah, don't go yet. Start from the beginning. So what I'm going to try to do a little bit is, I was trying to think about how I use mindfulness and being present, and how I use it in parenting. One of the things I'm going to try to talk to you today about is thinking about parenting from the paradigm of managing technology, of managing devices, because I have found that that is one of the most challenging things that we in the West, everywhere, are challenged with, and it's something that I'm really particularly interested in. So I'm going to try to use that as a paradigm to think about sort of putting mindfulness in parenting. I'm going to go to the next slide. Okay, so the goal of what I'm going to try to do in 10 minutes is talk a little bit about parenting in the digital age, look at the parenting styles, tell you a little bit about some of the research, and talk about how to be a mindful parent, and also thinking about how you can help your kids to do digital mindfulness, which I'm going to talk a little bit about, which is thinking about mindfulness as you parent and you're on your devices. So, next slide. Goals of parenting in the digital age. So the reason that I feel it's so important to talk about managing devices is because whether you like it or not, your children will spend more time on their devices than they will spend eating, sleeping, going to school, or with family or friends. And you can say that's not your kids, but unfortunately that is actually the reality. So therefore, I think it's critically important to think about how we raise our kids both online and offline. So go to the next slide. I sort of thought about some of the values, and thinking about what you said, really think about this for my own kids. And one of the things I wanted to think about, and there's a lot of really good research on thinking about intrinsic versus extrinsic values. I think in the Buddhist teaching this is very obvious, but it's not so obvious in the world we live in, which is thinking about what do you actually want for your kids? Because as you think about parenting, you have to think about what your value systems are. So some of the things that I put down for my kids, and my daughter is here, are things like resilient, kindness, empathy, being a strong sense of self, a good citizen. I really feel bad that I did not put happiness, oh no, I did put happiness. Oh yay, good. Glad I didn't. I just wanted to think about what's important, and what you'll notice that is not here is getting straight A's, going to an amazing college, getting the trophy, because the truth that that's not the priority. But since I'm from the West, and so I'm going to talk about some science research here, there's really great research out there now that parents that focus on intrinsic values, like compassion, like happiness, like empathy, their kids actually grow up to not just be happier, they also grow up to have a stronger sense of self, to be more empathetic, and to be more successful by how we tend to define it. So I think it's really important as you start your journey, or think about your journey of parenting, to think about what your goals are. So then once you've defined your goals, the next thing is to think about that you need to raise your kids online and offline, which means when you think about happiness and compassion and kindness, I know you all know how to do that offline. That's why you're here. But I also want you to think about how you're instilling that online, since your kids are spending so much time in the online world. Next one. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about parenting styles, thinking about how you raise your kids, what the research says, and how we can raise our kids to be happy and compassionate. The first thing that I would like to suggest to you all is I'd like you to think about this journey for us here, as sort of having a passport. So our generation of parents, we are the last generation to raise our kids in a digital world, having not been fully raised there ourselves. So essentially, we are immigrants and our children are first generation. And the reason that I think that's so important is that this is where all the conflict comes. It comes in this sort of push and pull. So I speak digital world with an accent. I always will. I still cannot use my phone. My daughter had to help me fix my camera before I got here. I'll always speak it with an accent. And my kids will always be fluent and go fluently on and off. And so just like any first generation, there's going to be, I actually hold on to the old world. I love newspapers. I like reading books. To be fair, it doesn't really matter whether it's on paper or digital. My children go seamlessly between online and offline, whereas I actually struggle to read online. So my point in saying all of this, it's the reality of the world. My point in saying all this is how do we decrease the conflict? Because in order to instill compassion and happiness, we do need to decrease the conflict. And that means being aware, which is back to sort of mindfulness, that I'm an immigrant and I speak with an accent, and my kids do not. And I need to not be afraid, and when I am afraid, I need to get my children's help. So your kids will smell your fear, so you don't want to be afraid, but that doesn't mean they will, you know they will. So that's a big issue with helping raise your kids. The more fearful you are, and it is in this world that we tend to be more fearful, the more fearful you are, the less effective of a parent you could be. So I really think about this. You're going to use your kids to help you translate, and you're going to take your digital passport, and this will hopefully help when the conflict comes. So first thing you have is your passport. The next thing that I'd like you to think about as a parent, next slide, is your parenting style. So in the West, we have done a lot of research on different types of parenting, and sociologists have defined 4 types of parents. There's laissez-faire parents. None of you are laissez-faire. No one who's laissez-faire shows up to this talk. That's obvious, right? So there's authoritarian parents. Authoritarian parents have strong values and strong rules, but it's very top-down. It's not so flexible, but it is consistent. Then there's permissive parents. All these parents love their kids, just to be clear. But there's permissive parents who are very good at understanding the unique needs of their kids, but not always great at setting limits and being consistent, right? So then there is authoritative, we'll go to the next slide, I think. Here. Then there's authoritative parents. And authoritative parents are parents that understand their value system and want to instill it, but also understand the special needs of every child and try to balance it. And the reason that you want to be authoritative is not just because I said, because again, I'm coming from the West, so I'm going to pull out some research here. The reason is because the research shows, and this is like 50-year-old research, that kids that grow up with authoritative parents have a lower BMI, less risk of diabetes, better grades, better sense of self, more self-confidence, and tend to be more successful. So our goal is, if you leave nothing else from this talk, our goal is to be authoritative as parents. Next slide. So now that you understand that you have a passport and we're going to all aspire to be authoritative, the next step is to think about what it means to be a parent. And I wanted to share with you what I think mindful parenting looks like. So this is one of my very favorite slides because I spend a lot of time talking to parents who tell me that they need to get their kids off their devices, that they need to meditate, that they need to be present, they need to do all this stuff. And then they're on their devices as well. In fact, something like 75 or 80% of parents believe that they're digital role models, and the average amount of time that parents are on their devices is, upwards of 8 hours. So I'm not here because this is a very non-judgmental, and I like to take a very non-judgmental approach. So we're not judging anybody here. What we're doing is saying you have to be mindful of who you are as a parent and what you bring to the table. And the first thing you need to be mindful of in this realm is thinking about your own relationship with technology. So if you're somebody, and I can own this myself, if you're somebody that struggles to unplug, to take time away from devices, or you need to be there for work, that's fine. But you need to be clear that you are modeling this for your kids. So you can go to the next slide. So the things that I think are really helpful, so all of parenting is really about, you have to understand what you're bringing to the table. It's not just about devices, right? You have to think about how you were raised, what's important to you, right? And the more honest you are and the more mindful you are about your own insecurities, pressures, whatever, that you're bringing as a parent, the more you can more honestly and authentically parent your kids. And since today I'm using the devices as our paradigm, you can go. The first thing you need to do is assess your relationship with technology. There's nothing wrong with having a big relationship with technology, but you have to understand your relationship before you can ask your kids to do things that you can't even do yourself. The next thing is, the struggle is real. I feel this is a really key part of parenting, is actually being honest with your own struggles and not being afraid to share them with your children. I'm not saying they need to know everything you go through. They don't need to know every fight you have with your wife or your husband, but they need to know how you struggle. If you're struggling, and it's not just in devices, if you're struggling with your own emotions, if you're struggling to find happiness or balance, it's okay. And I'm not talking about kindergartners, but with middle schoolers and above, I do want you to share it with your kids, because I think sometimes we feel that we have to put on this show for our kids, that we have our act together, and I think that does them a disservice. It makes it look like it's, oh, so easy. I got this balance and happiness thing down. And the truth is that that's not really honest. It's not honest for me. I don't think it's probably honest for most of you. And that's why I think it's important to share with your kids the struggles and the mistakes that you're making. Next thing is to be psychologically minded. And that is to really also understand. I'm not saying you have to be in therapy. Yes, you know, I'm a psychiatrist and we're in the West and we like shrinks. I'm saying that you need to be psychologically minded. What that actually means is kind of being mindful of how your feeling states, being aware of how your anxiety or your hate or your anger impacts you. The more you understand and are honest with yourself psychologically, the more you can take care of yourself, but also take care of your kids. And find your own village. I'm going to recommend a couple of books, but there's a book that just came out that I would really, Never Enough is what it's called. It's called Never Enough by Jennifer Wallace. It literally just came out in August. And it talks about the toxic culture, specifically here in the United States. And she has a really great research on finding your village. I think that in India, they know this is inherent, this is gonna seem very obvious to you. It's just not obvious here, which is that we were never meant to parent alone. So in order for you to find happiness and balance, and in order to help your kids find it, you have to have a team, a squad, a village. You have to have a couple people in your life that are honest with you, that'll tell you, oh, you're overboard here, or back off, or your anxiety is contagious and you're making your kid anxious. So you have to have some people in your life, and I will tell you, as someone who works full-time and has 3 kids, I kind of feel like sometimes I blow off my friends, and I will tell you that is not evidence-based. The evidence would say that I should be trying the best I can to keep my friends in my life, to keep the village. So, and what is interesting to me, because I like research, is that the research really supports that the parents are happier and the kids are happier when the parents sort of have a team. So these are the things that I recommend in terms of thinking about mindful parenting. Next slide. Okay, now, I don't know how much time I have, but now I would like to talk a little bit about what I call digital mindfulness, which is, I was thinking about this talk and about sort of like, I feel like I use mindfulness all the time, but how do I really use it? And I realized that really, if you're being thoughtful and intentional about your life, and especially about your time on devices, that you are being mindful. And so what I want to do is talk to you a little bit about helping your kids be digitally mindful on their devices. I'm not here today to talk about how much time they should be on it or if they should be on it. That's kind of like of the last decade, that's antiquated. We don't talk about that anymore. Because the truth is they're on it. Of course we want them off of it. You all know that. You don't need me to tell you that. But since they're on this journey, you have to be on this journey with them. And not all screen time is the same. We want to cultivate good screen time, but we also need to help our kids to be regulated and happy and find balance. So, next one. So I'm going to talk a little bit about digital mindfulness. This is the way I define mindfulness. I understand mindfulness is a broad concept, but it means paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. And so I would like to suggest that we can help our kids and ourselves to be more mindful, especially the time we spend on devices. So Common Sense, next slide. Common Sense Media, this is a beginning. They sort of help you with this. So this is just sort of a little bit of a paradigm, which is pause, think, ask. No, go back for a second. No, go back. Yeah, pause, think, ask. So pause means helping kids to be able to be on devices and pause, particularly when people come in the room, when being aware of other people coming in the room, to notice your feelings. Because one of the things I really want you to talk to your kids about is how they're actually feeling when they're on their devices. And then, of course, asking parents for help. Go to the next slide. Okay, so this is what I mean by digital mindfulness. I mean pausing for people and also recognizing, this is a great opportunity to practice mindfulness, is when you're on a computer or on your phone and you realize that you need to move. So there's both the physical and the emotional in my mind. And in terms of the physical piece, it's about understanding when you've been on too long and you need to move. And the other piece is actually recognizing your body, like when your shoulders are tight, when your hands are tight, when you're clenching your jaw, helping yourself and your kids to realize when there's a change in the physicality, recognizing when you're hungry and when you're tired, because I think what happens is kids get on devices and they forget all of this. And then of course, recognizing when you're frustrated, being able to talk to your parents about how frustrated they are, that they're being told to power down, and recognizing how the devices are making you feel. And this is even more important for middle schoolers as they get older, recognizing when you feel envy and jealousy and anxiety and sadness, because the first step is to recognize how the devices are making you feel, and then you can actually do something about it, right? So I want to talk for a moment about this new sense. I don't know if you guys have heard of this. I have not heard of this. This is a new sense like a senses, called interoception. I think researchers are calling it the 7th or 8th sense. I've sort of lost track of our senses. But this is really fascinating and really cutting edge, and I thought it really connected to sort of our discussion of mindfulness. Interoception is the sense that you have of knowing how your body and your mind is feeling. It's basically the mindfulness sense, but actually we now call it in biology a sense. It's knowing when you're hungry, it's knowing when your stomach's hurting, and it's also knowing when you're sad and you're angry, just having like an internal awareness. And there's all this really interesting new research on people that are very sensitive to their bodies and people that are less sensitive. People that are very sensitive to their bodies are often prone to things like anxiety and eating disorders. People that are less sensitive, which I think is maybe more pertinent to this group today, kids with ADHD, with slow processing, are often less sensitive to their own bodies. And with that is an increase in dysregulation, an increase in anger, an increase in anxiety. So becoming aware of how your body's feeling is a really key part to finding regulation and balance. So what I wanted to sort of end with was thinking a little bit about digital mindfulness, and specifically with a community of people that have learning challenges or ADHD, and thinking about how that actually plays out for parents. The most obvious, which you all know, you don't need me to tell you, is that kids with ADHD and learning issues have even more struggles with starting things, turning things off, powering things down, and transitions. That just means they need more assistance in terms of transitioning. They also are have more difficulty recognizing body signals and trouble with regulation and identifying emotions, especially emotions before they get big. So the key in helping find mindfulness and balance is really to be aware of how you're feeling and catching yourself before the emotions are too big, feeding yourself before you get too hungry, recognizing when you're getting angry or envious. Last slide. So in conclusion, what I would like to suggest to you all in terms of thinking about a Western view of digital mindfulness is to grab a digital passport, check your fear, realize what type of parenting style you're using, and aspire to be authoritative, but non-judgmentally accept where you are. Be a role model online and offline, or at least be aware of when you're not being a role model, right? Help your child to be mindful of who they are and how they feel online and offline. And really, if you leave with nothing else, helping your child while they're online to be more aware of their body and their feelings. So with that, thank you very much.
The joining of the Eastern and Western world is incredibly powerful. It's on. The joining of the Eastern and Western world is incredibly powerful and frankly deeply poignant to see how they are both distinct and in many ways can be joined. We had a few questions that had been pre-selected and pre-set in, and then I want to really open this up to the audience. But the first question I have, and I'm going to give it to either one of you, is how can parents create a supportive environment for their children? You know, you talk about the anxiety, you talk about searching for happiness. What are some very specific, concrete goals that parents should be focused on?
I think parents should not get too obsessed with their children. Maintain some distance, just like a experienced, grown grandfather, watching a little bit from a distance, and not talking too much, which you yourself don't practice, right? And you should, these children, these kids, they are very, very clever. They are watching what you're doing. They are not listening what you are saying, right? So be the role model. I'll give you one example and then I stop. Mahatma Gandhi, a mother brought her daughter to Mahatma Gandhi and said, my daughter keeps on eating chocolate after chocolate, chocolate after chocolate. You know, she doesn't listen to me, so what is your advice? Mahatma Gandhi said, come to see me after 20 days. Then after 20 days, the mother and the daughter came, and then Gandhi said, don't eat chocolate, not good for your health. Then the mother said, if this is all what you have to say, why didn't you tell this to me when we first came to see you? Mahatma Gandhi said, at that time I was also eating chocolate.
It's always really kind of hard to follow them. So to put this in Western parlance, that's about, right, so the idea of not being a helicopter parent, right? I like to use this like metaphor of sort of a lifeguard parent, of sort of like you're a lifeguard, so you're always present and aware of what's going on, but you're sort of up from a distance, right? So you can get as involved as you need to or not, but it's this idea of sort of being around but not being so intrusive. And I also think that it's important to emphasize the importance of making your kids be seen, feel seen, and mattering. This concept of like making sure your kids matter. It's not so much what they achieve. I know in my world, it's very much like sort of focused, everything's achievement focused, and trying to shift away to focusing and emphasizing things that matter, you know, compassion, kindness, and pointing it out to our kids, because they get all the other messages everywhere. They need to hear from us about the compassion and the kindness.
I'm actually going to skip this question because you give me a perfect opening here. What does compassion mean to you in your practice? What does it look like? What does it mean?
Again, I think it's all about compassion. I'm not sure that I went to med school, became a psychiatrist, and I didn't think about things from the Eastern perspective, but when you think and use those terms, it's all about compassion. I feel like it's what connects people. I kind of really liked what you said about it not just being about intelligence, but it's intelligence plus compassion, because I know in the world that we live in, it seems to all be about who's smarter, who makes more money. Really, really hard to shift away from that. And really it's about being smart, but it's also about the compassion piece. So I think that, and I think, to be honest, I think it's easy for you all in some ways, or you make it look easy, to model compassion. I think it's harder in our worlds and every day to actually model compassion. I think it's so easy, especially with all the tensions going on in the world right now. So I actually think it's a real challenge for parents right now to be modeling compassion.
In Buddhism, we say all the problems, difficulties that we get are primarily due to our obsession with just oneself. Primarily just thinking about oneself and not thinking about others. So this obsession with oneself is not even good, not only for others, it's not good for you. So therefore, just as you think about yourself, you should think more about others. And that will not only benefit others, but you will be the first beneficiary. So therefore, His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, if you want to be selfish, be wisely selfish.
Thank you for that. I'm going to go back to the idea of creating a supportive environment. We talked about how families can do this. What would be your suggestions or recommendations for how a school can create a supportive environment for children?
The first thing that comes in my mind is that school should be a place where kids or children want to go in terms of the teachers and the staffs and in terms of the environment. There's a nice playground, this. Therefore, it is very important to know the psychology of the child, you see. When young kids, it's their time to jump and sing and dance. They are bubbling with energy. So it should really be a place where they can run around, where they can jump, where they can shout, where they can play. School should not be a place where they should be confined, This will never work. This will never work. I have myself noticed, children of different ages. Once I went to South India in a monastery, big monastery. So they invited me to give a talk. So they put me on the second, floor. And the children were, the monk children, around 700 of them. They were all standing down. So the first line was the more grown-up people. Second was less grown-up. The third was the smallest monks. So I can see from there, the smallest monks were just like, they can't stay still. They were like, Then the next was a little bit less. Then the next was much less. So it's because of their age, you see. So you need to recognize the need of their age. So the school should really be something that they're wanting to go run, why there, Mama, this is my school time, I need to go, That should be there. That should be there.
I agree with you. I mean, I believe in joy and learning. I think what's so sad about our school system is that based on what grade a child's in, I know how much they like school or not. So the kindergartner loves school, first grade, right? And it feels that pretty much every year. It gets to a point where, like, I'll ask a third grader, do you like school? Yes, they like school. Oh, fourth grader's fun. Somewhere, at least in our world, somewhere around 5th and 6th grade, yeah, it's just, it just gets worse and worse and worse. And so we're doing something wrong. I don't know that we're doing as much wrong in elementary school. I think we get the joy of learning and playfulness in elementary school. We don't get the joy as much in middle. And somehow I know we need to be serious and academic, but somehow we've got to find a balance, right? Where kids that are in 7th grade and 9th grade and 12th grade actually want to go to school. And I think that's about joy. The other thing that I'd like to say about that, about just in terms of a community, is that I had this opportunity to be involved with the Gateway community a couple of weeks ago when there was sort of a violent, tragic kind of event. And I got to see firsthand what a real school community was. I'm not a school psychologist, but I ended up getting to spend the day with you all. And I have to tell you, it was a special day for me because I actually got a glimpse into sort of what a real community looks like, in the way that the teachers came together, and the way the teachers supported each other, the way the parents were involved. I had this opportunity to be on these different Zooms with different people, senior leadership, teachers, kids, and what was so striking to me was how supportive and loving and caring and worried they were. 7th graders were worried about the kindergartners. The teachers were worried. They were worried about making mistakes when all they had ever wanted to do was care for the kids. It was so remarkable, and it really helped me to understand at least what a school community should look like.
Thank you.
Welcome.
What's the best way to teach meditation to children?
We can't teach formal meditation or serious meditation. As I said, meditation is not sitting in a corner and closing your eye. At least you can tell them, sit quiet, that may be also useful. But more than that, what you need to teach children is let them do something good that they like to do. And let them do it repeatedly. And then praise them, wow, you're such a wonderful kid, you did this wonderful job. That is meditation. Doing the good things repeatedly. That is meditation. Getting your body and mind habituated with good ways of life. That's meditation. Meditation has nothing to do with any religion. It's a way of thinking, way of living. So let them get habituated with those good lifestyles and good ways of thinking.
I agree with you.
The last two questions, and I'm particularly interested in one word. how can parents help children navigate, and that's the phrase I focus, navigate complicated and controversial issues the world faces while staying calm and mindful? So that's really twofold. How do we help them navigate while we attempt to remain calm? And you addressed some of that in terms of sharing our emotions, but I'm wondering if there's more that we should be thinking about.
Yes, because I talk about sharing the struggles, sharing with your kids certain struggles that you are having so they understand things don't come easy, things are a process. Having said that, I think it's important if you're helping kids navigate, especially like the tensions and things that are going on right now in the world, is first checking your own, this is the parental mindfulness, first checking your own fear and anxiety. I think what's going around a lot right this moment is that parents are feeling very, very anxious and worked up about things going on in the world. And your feelings are very contagious to your kids. So I would tend to try to check your own, not deny the feelings, but understand your feelings. Because if you are fearful and anxious or angry, because there's a lot of anger right now, which is really, maybe more anger right now in New York than I've probably maybe seen in years and years. Trying to understand the anger and trying not to make it contagious to your kids.
I don't think it is a good idea to share, the dropping of atom bombs, on hundreds of people, those kind of views. I don't think it's a good idea to share these things to, young kids whose mind and brain is very, very impressionable. But what should we teach is, in their daily life, as a child, they also face day-to-day struggles and problems. There you need to teach them that all the struggles and problems can be solved through a calm, peaceful mind. The first thing that you should do is don't develop unnecessary fear, but look at the problem carefully and you will find the solutions. That you should teach them. Then also at the same time you should teach them that there may be some problems you may not also be able to solve, but don't worry about that. You are not here to solve all the problems. So make a distinction between those problems that you can solve, those problems that you cannot solve. If it is a problem that you can solve, don't worry because you are going to solve it. If it is a problem that you can never solve, forget it. Say, go hell with you. I have many other things to do.
The last question I would add is, what techniques, we're talking about navigating emotions, what techniques would you encourage to help someone navigate their emotions? How it's important to understand that we do need to do so, but how do we do so?
I mean, I think that's kind of what we've been talking about like all evening, right? A little bit of how to navigate. Again, I feel with parents and kids, I think that there's a degree of mindfulness, understanding sort of your own feelings in terms of how you approach things. I do believe a lot in the mindset piece. I think in the mindset discussion sort of in the Buddhist principles is a little bit different. I didn't talk about cognitive behavioral therapy today, but in the West, that would be, I always consider that to be the sort of Western version, if that makes sense, of the sort of Eastern mindset. The Western version is sort of this cognitive behavioral therapy, where we talk about the reflexive automatic thoughts that you have. I'm ugly, I'm fat, I hate the person, that kind of thing. And then how to counter that. Sort of how to come up with alternative thoughts. And how at the core, if you feel good about yourself, you can begin to come up with alternative ways of thinking about things. And that you can use your mind and your feelings to change your behavior. So I'm a big believer in teaching kids about sort of mind, feelings, behavior. The way, if you change the way, which I think is pretty much what you all say, but I think it's sort of different language. If you can change the way that you think about something, you can actually change your feelings. You can change, like for instance, your anxiety, and then you can change your behavior. You can not be afraid to do something, and then you can think about it, and they usually show it in a triangle. So I try to talk to kids about their missteps in thinking, and how to shift that, and what the alternatives are. So I like to use that technique, and then I also think using general mindfulness. And then the last thing I think is really about just communication between parents and kids. Like I think that the more, I know we're not supposed to talk too much. I understand that, and my daughter would support that I should not talk so much. But I do think that communicating with your kids and talking through, not necessarily all of your feelings and certainly not the stuff that's in the news, I really agree about on that part, but really talking to your kids about the strategies you're using and the skills that you're using to find balance and to be regulated is really important.
I think I have already mentioned in my talk, the first thing that you need to teach them is arisal of these various emotions, including negative emotions, does not make you a bad person. These are natural, just like the animals. We are basically, our origin is animals, you see. So we do have this anger, jealousy, hatred, they arise. That's okay. But what is not okay is if you think that I should continue to get angry or develop attachment. Now here you need to teach them, bringing the children, closer to you and tell them, do you feel better when you get angry? Do you enjoy when you get angry? They are very clever. These kids, they are very clever. They'll say no. They'll say, okay. Then next time try to reduce your anger, try to reduce your attachment, things like that. That must be. Another very important thing is, one very important teaching that is given in Buddhism is, make a distinction between the wrongdoer and the wrongdoing. All of us commit some problems, mistakes, but that does not make us a bad person. What is bad is the wrongdoing, not you, meaning that you can always change, right? That's important. And then the next thing is, we should all realize, and I always have been telling this to people, that whoever you are, kids or grown-up people, you are the only true original copy in this world. You are not a duplicate, you are not photocopy. Which means you have your own special capacity, special talent, special intelligence. You doesn't have to be like everybody. That's a very important point that I want to make. So that's why it is okay to do computation, but not the negative computation. Don't do the computation by thinking that I have to be exactly like this person. That's wrong. It's like running a race. That person wants to become fast, you also want to reach fast. That's okay, you run as much as you can. But while you try to get number one, don't push that person. Right? So that's important. Then it's okay.
Thank you so much. I'm going to shift a little bit now. We received several questions ahead of time. We've shared them with you, but I'm wondering if there are thoughts or questions from the audience. Yes.
I guess like going back to kindergartner age, which is probably the most difficult when you think about trying to teach or instill these things. How do you respect your child's capacity to transition and support them in that moment while holding boundaries in that parent-child dynamic? So if you think about a device and they have a difficult time transitioning out of that, you want to be there for them to help them through the transition, but also, have firm boundaries so that they understand what's appropriate and what's not.
It's a great question. Yes, I mean, you answered your own question in your question, just to be clear, right? You know that. And I don't know if it's, I'm gonna be honest with you, it's probably easier with the kindergartner than it is with the older kids. Because with the but with the kindergartner, I actually think it's easier, truly. You need to validate their feelings, that they're frustrated or they don't want to give it up. Those feelings are real. We're trying to validate them. But I think with a kindergartner, you then have to set real limits. Like there is a time to do this and a time not to do this, if that makes sense. I've tried with kindergartners to do what I would call like an organic positive reinforcement, meaning that we're gonna have family time and take a bath and do dinner, and then we're gonna play on the iPad. And try to decrease the amount of times you're pulling them on and off. Because I think what you're talking about is how do you pull your kid on and off their devices, validate their feelings, yet still have limits. Yeah, that is the $1 billion question. to be clear, but I think you already have the answer, which is that at that age, and it's not so simple when they get older, at that age, you have a sense of what you think is appropriate. What I would say is about the digital immigrant and checking your own fear. Like, what I will say to parents is when you're pulling the device away from the child, like, why? If it's just truly that it's been too much time, that's fine. Or you're just feeling fearful. Did you just look at the child and decide, oh my God, they're not going to college because they're on their phone all the time, which is kind of what like a lot of us do, right? So I would be thoughtful about why they need to come off. The other way that can help kids get off devices is validating whatever they're doing on their device. For instance, if they're watching Sesame Street, you're not going to turn it off in the middle of the show. You're going to turn it off at the end. And what's really important is if your kids are playing games, and if they're young, they should be educational games. But if they're playing games, what I would suggest is let the game end. We decide, oh, it's been 7.5 minutes, I need to pull it away, but you're not really validating their experience. Their experience is you've let them play a game. When the game is over, we're gonna shut it down. Does that make sense? Because now you're basically teaching your child regulation. Like, because it isn't, you don't necessarily need them off that moment. So what you really want to start in kindergarten is being on the journey together, where they begin to understand, okay, I played one game, now it's time to be off my device and go do something else. But my mother's gonna let me finish the game. The problems come when you pull it. I don't know, that's helpful.
Any other questions? Mark? Yes.
I was going to ask, is there a recommended way to sort of reconcile having positive thoughts and like the benefits of positive thoughts on your own well-being and well-being of others in your like care, with also having an obligation to know what's happening in the world and engage with news? You know, a lot of people like, well, they don't watch the news anymore, and I totally get that. I have fights with my husband sometimes about I shouldn't be reading certain things because it's going to upset me, and I feel like, how do you like understand what's going on in the world, and be a participant, and also keep a positive mindset?
Yeah, so I think you're asking about how can you be a responsible citizen of the world and yet still also maintain sort of positive happiness kind of piece, if that makes sense, which I do think you're would be able to answer this better. Again, I believe in being a responsible citizen, so I don't think that the goal as an adult, I'm not talking about kids. I think with kids, you should do what's right for your kids. If you feel like they need to be watching the news and understanding it, that's one thing, and if not, that's your call as a parent to figure out. Yeah, but for adults, yeah, I know, this is a really good question. I think that you want to be a responsible citizen, although I don't know what you're achieving by torturing yourself with watching, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I get so many Instagram and things being sent to me constantly right now that like I actually don't look at I've actually stopped looking at my phone. And sometimes I feel guilty that I'm not being a responsible citizen, but I think you do have to take care of yourself. I don't know that taking care of yourself is inconsistent with being like a good citizen of the world. You know what I'm saying? I'm not sure how many images. I think this is back to the world we live in, where we get so bombarded by images that I just don't think it's so necessary. I was reading The Interpreter of Maladies this whatever with my son this past week, and I was struck by how it's all about they had very little contact with what's going on in the world, if that makes sense. Like in the 1970s and 80s, we got one image. You watched the news for 20 minutes, and that was enough. Now it's sort of like you have to be bombarded by images in order to be a good citizen. So I would like to suggest that we were better off in the 70s and 80s when you watched the local news for a half an hour and then you put it away. So I think you have to take care of yourself at the end of the day.
And it was news, not
Let me,
Right, yes.
I don't know whether I got your question, but by listening to you, it looks like I got that. So, if you look at this English word, individual, word individual means that you are indivisible part of the world, the bigger one. You are part. So the part definitely has to play the role. You call it citizen or whatever you want to call it. We all have to play a role, especially in today's world. We are living in a world where we will either swim together or sing together. This is the situation. So we all have to take that responsibility. Now here, what is important is, as you also mentioned, we are bombarded with information. And to our great dismay, much of the information is junk information. So first of all, it's important to get the right information and not waste your time on junk information, be it through television or whatever. Second is, more than information, you need to get the precise knowledge. Even more important than knowledge is wisdom. So somebody gave a very good example about this by saying that information is like reading all the books about how to build a ship, but you don't know how to build a ship. It's reading all the books about how to build a ship. Knowledge is being able to build the ship. But how you are going to use this ship, still not sure. So it is the wisdom that ensures the ship does not sink, right? So in our life also, as you rightly mentioned, we have no time to listen to all the 100,000 channels, or read all the 100,000 books. You see, what's important is just to get those knowledges, which is really, really necessary for our well-being, for the well-being of the world, for the goodness of the environment and so forth. I think there is much more than enough.
Right? To give you a sense, we're going to take maybe 2 more questions. Then I know Matthew and Alan have some concluding remarks, and then we have 2 very special guests. So, other questions? Yes.
I have a question. I think you were talking about how you visited the school. How do you sort of motivate kids to do the right thing or be good or at least be on the path to doing good? Are there ways where you would say something to a child that would help them, feel motivated and not feel the weight of the fears they have, but sort of rise above that and motivate themselves?
I mean, I'm not father or mother, So all my, sharing is theoretical knowledge. I don't have the real experience. But to my little bit understanding and having dealt with all kinds of people, including children, I think when you deal with small kids, you need to become a kid. You need to play with them. You need to understand their mind and accordingly address their issues. Then you have the advantage of having a more mature mind, more experience. So while playing with them, you inject a little bit of your wisdom, your knowledge, your love, so that the children, they will easily come and listen to you. They're happy to be, around you. Then that's the opportunity where you can, guide and teach them.
Any other questions? All right, I'm going to invite Matthew and Alan back for a few closing remarks, and then 2 people who've been waiting very patiently have something very special to share.
Let's give another round of applause for our 2 wonderful panelists.
We're so grateful for both of you for sharing your wisdom with us. From our own experiences at TCV and with our families, we know that maintaining emotional well-being is important. But your words today reminded us that keeping both Western and Eastern perspectives in mind can help us navigate our emotions and improve our quality of life. Nowadays, navigating our emotions as kids has never been harder. Social media and video games seem like necessities for socializing, but the more we get into it, the harder it is to get out. As teenagers, we feel stressed because the news always seems to tell a negative story. We feel stressed because the college process is harder than it ever was. And we feel stressed because we can never be good enough. This process might be even harder for children with learning differences.
Even as an 8th grader, 9th grade seems like impending doom. Like my whole middle school experience has been building up for high school, and if I didn't do well enough, then it would all be for nothing.
Educators and parents, your kids are depending on you to help them cultivate a good balance of work and play. By working with the concepts introduced to us today, you can help our generation solve this crisis of finding emotional well-being.
We hope that our curriculum helps kids not focus on their intrusive emotions, but rather focus on working productively by changing their mindsets. It is not a good thing to be anxious of the future in our experience, and we are excited to help kids at Gateway work through that anxiety and stay focused on the right tasks. Speaking of Gateway students, we would like to introduce two 7th graders, Andrew Wu and Jack Higgins, to conclude by reading the poem Allow Me by Bert Hellinger.
Jill, would you be comfortable back there or in front holding a mic? What would make you comfortable?
I allow by Bert Hellinger. I allow anything to happen. I allow it. Things start like this, develop like this, and end like this. Because I know that all things are caused by the combination of fate, and everything happens. If I think it should be another way, may hurt, but myself. The only thing I can do is allow. I allow someone to be who he is, and I allow him to think this way, and to judge me and treat me this way, because I know he is who he is, and he is right. If I think he should be otherwise, a look that hurts. Just myself. The only thing I can do is allow.
I allow my thoughts like this. I allow each thought to exist. Let it exist. Let it disappear, because I know that the thought itself is meaningless and has nothing to do with me. If I think it should not, the only thing I can do is allow myself to be hurt by such thoughts. I allow my emotions to arise. I allow each emotion to happen and let it go, because I know that emotions are just physical sensations that are neither good nor bad. The more I resist, the stronger I feel emotional. Hurt like this shouldn't happen. Just myself. The only thing I can do is allow. I allow it to be what I am. I allow it to be what I do. I do what I do because I know what it looks like on the outside. It's just a buildup of me, the real me. I'm smart enough. Hurt. Just if I think it should be something else, hurt. Just myself. The only thing I can do is allow.
I know that I am here for the experience of life, in the present moment, and the only thing I have to do
in each present moment is to fully allow, to fully experience, fully to enjoy, seeing, just watching.